Okay, guys, so I hope you thought about that a little bit. I want to spend a little bit more time talking about tolerance, withdrawal, and craving. Um, because even though tolerance, withdrawal, and craving are treated as equal potential indicators of an alcohol or substance use disorder in the DSM, they do indicate both physiologic and psychological changes that occur in the individual when use of a substance has become problematic and has happened regularly and to excess. So I think you have a pretty good sense of tolerance and withdrawal based on the definition I gave in the prior slide. Tolerance is basically physical habituation to a drug. Remember what hitch a bitch up? How about just I can't talk. Remember what remember what habituation means. Let me tell you guys, when you are recording videos the upwards of 10, 15, 18 hours a day, after a while you just can't speak anymore. Physical habituation. Remember what habituation means in psychology. You may have taken sensation and perception or remember it from intro or other courses. It means that you stop responding. A sensory system stops responding to repeat presentation of the same stimulus, right? So if someone kept poking your arm, after a while, those receptors in your arm will not feel it as much and it gets numb, because the same stimulus is no longer being responded to at the same level of intensity. It's the same thing here. Once your body gets accustomed to receiving the same dosage level of alcohol or a drug, it will stop responding at the same level of intensity, so you will need to raise your intake to achieve the same original effect, and then eventually you reach a plateau. So it's not linear. It's not the more you keep using, the more you keep responding. You keep using and get a response until you eventually plateau and level off, where greater uses of the drug once you reach that plateau really don't result in any additional response physiologically or psychologically. So tolerance in the DSM is defined as either needing to use noticeably larger amounts of the alcohol or drug over time to get the desired effect, or noticing less of an effect over time after repeated use of the same amount. And then withdrawal is also known as abstinence syndrome. And as I said in the prior slide, this is a series of unpleasant and even sometimes can be life-threatening symptoms that occur when ingestion of your drug of choice, alcohol, drug, etc., is stopped. These symptoms can be physical and psychological, right? So things like anxiety, irritability, fatigue, nausea and vomiting, hand tremors, or seizures in the case of alcohol. But in addition to those symptoms, many of which are physical, you notice anxiety as a psychological withdrawal symptom. People experience confusion, difficulty in decision making, attentional deficits depending on the substance, depression. Cocaine, for example, one of the withdrawal symptoms when people stop using cocaine, which is a central nervous system stimulant, is they crash. And depression and depressive symptomology is a common withdrawal symptom when people stop using central nervous system stimulants like amphetamines, cocaine, and methamphetamine. Finally, craving, as I mentioned earlier, is a strong desire to use that people have difficulty resisting. This can be explained by both physical dependence and classical conditioning. So remember classical conditioning from many classes you've taken, including this class, but many others. It is true that one of the reasons people have a very strong desire to use their substance of choice, like alcohol or OxyContin or whatever, cocaine, one reason is physiologic, because we're going to talk about the changes that take place in the brain in terms of neurotransmitters, the biochemistry of the brain. That can help to explain the craving when people stop using. But in addition to that, classical conditioning plays a very large role in the craving process, because when people use a substance regularly, they tend to use it with similar environmental circumstances. And those environmental circumstances become cues. They become associated with use. And so just like in any other circumstance where classical conditioning produces a response when two things are associated repeatedly, it happens here too, right? So we talked about classical conditioning in this class in another context. Well, now we can explain it here with regard to craving. If somebody uses cocaine every day in the same place, let's say the same table, and they put their cocaine out on this table right in front of me, eventually, through classical conditioning, this table has become a cue for the brain to expect cocaine. And so eventually, just sitting at this table, seeing this table, touching this table, it already triggers the craving process in the brain, so that whenever the person is in the presence of this table, with or without cocaine present, they will start to strongly desire use of the substance, and it will become a trigger, so that once neutral stimulus, which in this example is the table, becomes a conditioned stimulus. And you know what this means now because we spent a lot of time on this in this class in a previous unit. The neutral stimulus of the table becomes a conditioned stimulus, and in the presence of that conditioned stimulus, craving for the substance, in this case cocaine, becomes the conditioned response. Now, this is a big deal because when people are trying to stop using a substance, they are going to have to avoid and or remove all of the classically conditioned cues to craving. So we're going to come back to that later in this unit.